Sarah Chen's boots echoed against the polished obsidian floor as she stumbled through the airlock, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, the distinctive whine of Krillian energy weapons grew louder. The pirates had been hunting her for 3 days across the void sector, and now they had cornered her in the most ironic place possible, the abandoned seat of galactic power itself. The Imperial Palace had been a tomb for 3 millennia. Every salvager in the Outer Rim knew the stories. The Crystal Throne, once the seat of an empire spanning 10,000 worlds, sat empty and lifeless. Dozens of species had tried to claim it over the centuries. War heroes, elected leaders, self-proclaimed emperors, all had approached the throne with confidence, only to find themselves rejected by its ancient mechanisms. The throne remained cold, unresponsive, waiting for something or someone that apparently no longer existed. Sarah pressed herself against the massive doors as they sealed shut. Her ship, the Wanderer, was docked 3 levels down, but the pirates had already found it. Her only hope was to stay hidden until they gave up the hunt. She touched the data chip in her pocket. 3 months of deep space archaeology work, documenting ruins in the forgotten reaches. It would pay off her debt to the mining guild and buy her freedom if she could just survive the next few hours. The throne room stretched before her, like a cathedral made of starlight. Massive columns of some translucent material rose toward a domed ceiling that showed the swirling galaxy beyond. And there, at the center of it all, sat the crystal throne. It was smaller than she had expected, more elegant than imposing. The seat was carved from what looked like a single piece of crystalline material that seemed to contain moving lights within its depths. No dust covered it, despite the centuries of abandonment. Nowhere marked its perfect surfaces. The doors behind her shuddered as something heavy struck them. The pirates had found her trail. Sarah looked around desperately for another exit, but the throne room had only one entrance. She was trapped. A voice boomed through hidden speakers, speaking in galactic standard with mechanical precision that made her skin crawl. Unauthorized presence detected. Palace security protocols activated. Intruders will be removed. The lights dimmed to an ominous red, and Sarah heard the hum of defensive systems coming online. Ancient weapons, dormant for millennia, were awakening. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was about to be killed by the very defenses meant to protect the throne she could never claim. But then she noticed something. The weapons weren't targeting her. Every energy signature she could detect was focused on the doors behind her, where the pirates were trying to break through. The palace AI was treating her differently. Why? Another thunderous impact echoed through the chamber. The doors began to glow cherry red from the concentrated fire of the pirates' plasma cutters. They would be through soon, and then security systems or not, she would be dead. The Krillians were notorious for their cruelty toward humans. They consider her species to be barely above vermin, good only for manual labor in their mining operations. Sarah found herself walking toward the throne, not because she believed she could claim it. That was absurd. She was nobody, a failed terraforming engineer turned salvager, carrying more debt than hope. But something about the crystalline seat drew her forward. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the way the lights within the crystal seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The floor beneath the throne was made of the same translucent material, and as she approached, she could see that it contained elaborate patterns, circuits maybe, or some kind of mystical symbols. They began to glow faintly as she drew near. Sarah stopped, suddenly afraid. The stories were clear about what happened to those who tried to sit on the throne without being worthy. Some were simply ignored. Others were reportedly destroyed by energies too powerful for mortal beings to contain. Behind her, the doors finally gave way. The distinctive battle cry of Krillian raiders filled the air as they poured into the sacred chamber, their weapons raised. Their leader, a 7-foot-tall reptilian humanoid covered in scarred scales, looked around the throne room with predatory hunger. When his yellow eyes fixed on Sarah, his lipless mouth spread in what might have been a grin. "Little human," he hissed in accented standard, "you have led us on quite a chase. But it ends here in this monument to dead glory. How fitting." Sarah backed toward the throne, her hand unconsciously reaching for the plasma pistol at her hip. She knew it was useless against her armor, but desperation made her fingers close around the grip anyway. The pirate leader laughed, a sound like grinding glass. Do you know where you are, meat? This is the throne room of the old empire, the seat of power that ruled the galaxy when your species was still learning to make fire. And you, a worthless scavenger, dare to stand before it. The other pirates spread out around the chamber, their weapons trained on her. There were at least a dozen of them, all heavily armed and armored. Sarah was outgunned, outnumbered, and running out of options. The throne was directly behind her now. She could feel warmth radiating from it, as if the crystal itself was alive. The chip, the leader demanded, extending one clawed hand. Give it to us, and your death will be quick. Sarah's hand tightened on her weapon. 3 months of work, her only chance at freedom, her ticket away from the life of running and hiding and scraping by on the edges of civilized space. She looked at the pirates, at their confident sneers, at the way they had casually violated this ancient place. And then she sat down. The crystal throne accepted her. The moment Sarah's body touched the crystal seat, the universe exploded into sensation. Light erupted from the throne in waves of brilliant gold and silver, washing over the chamber like liquid fire. The Krillian pirates stumbled backward, raising their arms to shield their eyes from the blazing radiance. Their leader roared in rage and confusion, his weapons targeting system unable to lock onto anything through the overwhelming brilliance. But Sarah felt no pain. The light flowed through her, around her, into her. Information cascaded across her consciousness, like a waterfall of pure knowledge. The history of the galaxy, the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, the secret workings of technologies beyond current understanding. All of it poured into her mind in an instant that felt like eternity. She saw the truth about the throne. It wasn't simply a seat of political power. It was a living interface, designed by an ancient race called the Architects who had transcended physical existence eons ago. They had built it to find someone, not necessarily to rule, but to protect, to be the guardian the galaxy would need when darkness threatened to consume everything. The throne had been waiting. For 3,000 years, it had tested every being who approached it, searching for specific qualities that had nothing to do with strength or birthright or political ambition. It looked for something rarer, the willingness to sacrifice oneself for others, the ability to see beyond one's own needs, the courage to act when action seemed impossible. Sarah understood now why she had been allowed into the palace, why the security systems hadn't targeted her. The throne had been calling to her across the void, drawing her here for this moment. Every choice she had made, leaving her comfortable position as a terraforming engineer to search for her missing brother in the Outer Rim, spending her savings to help refugees from the Kethan war zones, risking her lifetime and again for people she barely knew. All of it had been leading to this. The pirates were shouting now, their voices distorted by the energy field surrounding the throne. Their leader fired his weapon, but the plasma bolt simply dissipated against the protective barrier that had sprung up around Sarah. She could see their fear growing as they realized they were witnessing something beyond their understanding. Knowledge continued to flow into her. She learned that the galaxy was in greater danger than anyone knew. The political deadlock of the past 3 millennia hadn't been an unfortunate consequence of the empty throne. It had been orchestrated. Something ancient and malevolent had been working from the shadows, slowly weakening the bond between species, encouraging conflict and distrust. The Devourers, beings of pure entropy who existed to unmake creation itself. They had destroyed the last emperor not through violence, but through corruption. They had shown him visions of absolute power, convinced him that the other species were holding him back, that he alone deserved to rule. In his growing paranoia and cruelty, he had become something monstrous. The throne had rejected him, and in his rage, he had tried to destroy it. The attempt had torn him apart on a molecular level, but not before he had damaged the throne's ability to properly communicate with potential successors. Until now, Sarah's arrival had somehow completed a repair cycle that had been running for 3,000 years. The throne was fully awakened for the first time since the Empire fell. She felt the weight of 10,000 worlds settling on her shoulders. Billions of beings across the galaxy, all looking to the center for leadership that had been absent for too long. The throne was offering her power beyond imagination, the ability to command vast fleets, to reshape planets, to bend the very laws of physics to her will. But With the power came responsibility. The Devourers were moving again, and they were close to achieving their ultimate goal, the complete dissolution of organized civilization. Wars were erupting across the Rim territories. Trade routes were collapsing. Entire species were turning on their neighbors based on whispered lies and manufactured grievances. The galaxy needed an emperor, not a tyrant or a puppet, but a true guardian, someone willing to bear the burden of protecting trillions of lives, even at the cost of their own happiness and freedom. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she understood what was being asked of her. She was nobody special. She had no royal blood, no political connections, no grand destiny written in the stars. She was just a woman who had tried to do the right thing whenever she could, even when it cost her everything. Maybe that was enough. The pirate leader had regained some of his composure and was screaming orders at his crew. They were setting up some kind of heavy weapon, something that looked like it could punch through the energy barrier protecting the throne. Sarah realized she had to act. The knowledge flowing through her included command protocols for Palace's defense systems, weapons that could turn the raiders to ash in seconds. All she had to do was think the command, and they would die. But she hesitated. These beings had threatened her, hunted her, intended to kill her without mercy. By any measure, she would be justified in defending herself. The throne's power sang through her veins, offering swift and terrible justice. Instead, Sarah reached out with her consciousness and activated the palace's transportation system. Golden light surrounded each of the pirates, and in an instant, they were gone, transported to their ship in orbit, along with a message that appeared on their main screen. Leave the system and never return. This is your only warning. The throne room fell silent, except for the gentle hum of awakening systems. Sarah sat in the crystal throne, feeling the weight of her choice. She could have killed them. Part of her had wanted to, but an emperor who began their reign with unnecessary violence would become the very thing the galaxy needed protection from. Around her, the palace began to stir. Lights that had been dark for millennia flickered to life. Ancient machines hummed with renewed purpose. In the depths of the structure, she could feel vast networks coming online. Communication systems, sensor arrays, manufacturing facilities that could build anything from medical supplies to star destroyers. But most importantly, she felt the throne's connection to something else. Something vast and patient and impossibly old. The architects had left more than just a throne. They had left a network, a web of power and knowledge that spanned the galaxy. And now, for the first time in 3,000 years, it had an operator. Sarah Chun, failed terraforming engineer and deep space salvager, had become the ruler of the largest empire in galactic history. The question now was, what was she going to do with it? The first message arrived within hours. Sarah sat in the throne, still overwhelmed by the cascade of sensory input from across the galaxy, when a priority transmission blazed across the palace's communication network. The holographic display materialized in front of her, showing the scarred face of Admiral Corvex of the Altarian Defense Fleet. "Unknown entity occupying the Imperial Palace," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "You will immediately surrender yourself to Altarian custody for questioning. Any attempt to activate Imperial weapon systems will be considered an act of war against the Galactic Council." Sarah almost laughed. The Galactic Council was a joke. 12 species constantly deadlocked in committee, unable to agree on the color of space, let alone coordinate any meaningful response to the growing crises plaguing the Rim territories. She could see through the throne sensors that Corvex had positioned 3 heavy cruisers around the palace, their weapons trained on the ancient structure. More messages followed. The hegemony of worlds demanded her immediate execution as a pretender. The Trade Federation offered to negotiate terms for her surrender. The Zephyrian Empire declared that any human claiming imperial authority was an insult to all proper civilization. Each message revealed the same underlying assumption, that she was a fraud, a desperate scavenger who had somehow triggered ancient security systems but possessed no real authority. They saw her species, her background, her complete lack of political connections, and dismissed her as irrelevant. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Through the throne's network, Sarah could see everything. The Krillian raiders who had chased her were already attacking a refugee convoy 3 systems away, emboldened by their encounter with what they assumed was just unusual palace defenses. A trade war between the Centauri Alliance and the outer colonies was escalating toward actual violence. In the forgotten reaches, entire worlds had gone dark, their populations simply vanishing without explanation. And beneath it all, she could sense something else. A whisper of wrongness, a subtle corruption spreading to the quantum foam itself. The Devourers were moving, their influence seeping into the minds of leaders and generals, pushing the galaxy toward chaos. Sarah closed her eyes and reached out through the network. The throne responded, connecting her consciousness to monitoring stations and sensor arrays scattered across 10,000 systems. The scope of the intelligence network was staggering. The architect had been thorough in their preparation for this moment. She found what she was looking for in the Kepler sector, a massive fleet of ships bearing no identification, their hulls black as a void between stars. They moved with purpose toward the heavily populated Terran colonies, and their energy signatures were wrong somehow, twisted in ways that made her mind recoil from direct observation. The Devourers had allies in the physical realm, beings that had chosen entropy over existence, trading their souls for power over decay and dissolution. They called themselves the Void Fleet, and they were 3 days away from committing genocide on a scale not seen since the fall of the old empire. Sarah made her first decision as emperor. The Imperial shipyard at Nexus Station had been dormant for 3 millennia, its vast construction base silent and empty. Now, at Sarah's command, it roared to life. Automated systems that had waited centuries for orders began working with impossible speed and precision. Materials flowed through quantum fabricators, assembling themselves into configurations that pushed the boundaries of known physics. In 6 hours, the first new Imperial warship in 3,000 years slid out Construction Bay. The Defiance was beautiful and terrible, its crystalline hull incorporating technology that made the galaxy's most advanced vessels look like toys. It carried no crew. The throne could control it directly through quantum entanglement, allowing Sarah to command the ship as if it were an extension of her own body. Admiral Corvex's threats became considerably less confident when the Defiance appeared on his sensors. He had seen the technical specifications of Imperial vessels in historical databases, but those were just numbers on a screen. The reality of facing such overwhelming technological superiority was apparently different. "This is Admiral Corvex to the Imperial Palace." His second message began, and Sarah noted the change in his tone. "We request clarification of your intentions regarding galactic security." Sarah activated the palace's main communication system, her voice carrying across subspace to every major world in the galaxy. When she spoke, her words reached billions of beings simultaneously, transmitted by a network that could not be jammed, blocked, or ignored. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, and felt the weight of history in those simple words. "For 3,000 years, you have lived without Imperial protection. You have faced pirates, plagues, and wars without the support that is your birthright. This ends now." She stood, the crystal throne responding to her movement by projecting her image across space. Every major news network, government facility, and public gathering place in civilized space suddenly displayed the figure of a young human woman in salvageur's clothing, speaking with quiet authority from the seat of ultimate power. "I am Sarah Chun, and I claim the crystal throne by right of acceptance. The palace systems have awakened, and the empire is reborn. But this will not be the empire of old. There will be no conquered worlds, no enslaved populations, no rule through fear. The new empire exists for one purpose: to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The response was immediate and chaotic. Some called her a pretender, others a madwoman. But in the outer rim, where pirates and raiders had grown bold in the absence of Imperial authority, people began to hope. Sarah felt their hope through the network, a warm glow among the cold stars. But she also felt the growing darkness. The Void Fleet had accelerated, sensing the change in the galaxy's balance. They would reach the Terran colonies in less than 2 days. She had to move fast. The Defiance was enough. Even with its superior technology, one ship couldn't face an entire fleet. But the throne's knowledge included designs for something else, something the old empire had never dared to build. A weapon that could reshape the fundamental forces of reality itself. The Crown of Worlds, an artificial intelligence of staggering capability, designed to coordinate defensive efforts across the entire galaxy simultaneously. It would be the ultimate expression of imperial power, capable of commanding millions of ships, analyzing countless battle scenarios, and respond to threats faster than any organic mind could process. But creating it would require a sacrifice. The Crown needed a consciousness to guide it, someone willing to merge their individual identity with something infinitely larger. The person who activated it would become part of the network, their human awareness dissolve into cosmic responsibility. Sarah looked out at the stars beyond the throne room's transparent dome. Somewhere in that vast expanse, innocent people were about to die. Children who would never see another sunrise. Families who would be torn apart by beings that existed only to destroy. She had become emperor to protect them, if that protection required her own identity as the price. So be it. But first, she needed to make one more transmission. Captain Morrison, this is Sarah Chun. I need you to listen carefully because I don't have much time. The holographic display showed her old friend's weathered face, confusion and disbelief warring in his expression. Jack Morrison commanded the merchant vessel Prosperity, and he had been Sarah's partner on dozens of salvage operations over the years. More importantly, he was currently 3 days out from Earth with a cargo hold full of medical supplies for the colonies. Sarah, what the hell is going on? Every news feed in the galaxy is saying you're claiming to be the new emperor. Please tell me this is some kind of elaborate con job. Sarah smiled sadly. She could see his ship through the network now, a tiny spark of warmth against the cosmic dark. Behind him, she could also see the approaching shadow of the Void Fleet, their ships leaving tears in reality itself wherever they passed. It's real, Jack. All of it. And I need you to do something for me. There's a fleet coming toward Earth, and they're not interested in conquest. They want to erase humanity entirely. The colonies need to be evacuated, now. Morrison's expression shifted to one of professional concern. He had fought in the Kethran War, had seen what genocide looked like up close. How many ships? What kind of firepower are we talking about? Through the throne sensors, Sarah counted the approaching vessels. 247 capital ships, each one capable of cracking a planet's crust. They'll reach the outer colonies in 36 hours. Sweet mother of... Morrison ran a hand through his graying hair. Sarah, even if I could convince the colonial governors to order an evacuation, we don't have enough transport capacity. There are 6 billion people on those worlds. I know. Sarah felt the weight of those numbers, each one representing a life that would be lost if she failed. But I have a plan. I just need you to trust me one more time. She explained what she needed him to do. Morrison listened in growing amazement as she outlined the technical specifications for modifications to his ship's communication array. The changes would turn the Prosperity into a relay station, capable of extending the throne's network into the colonial territories. This is insane, Morrison said when she finished. You're talking about linking civilian ships to Imperial technology that hasn't been used in 3,000 years. What if something goes wrong? Then 6 billion people die, and the Devourers move on to their next target. Sarah's voice was steady, but Morrison could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She had been sitting in the throne for 18 hours straight, and the constant flow of information was taking its toll. Jack, I wouldn't ask if there was any other choice. Morrison nodded slowly. All right, but Sarah, what aren't you telling me? There's something else, isn't there? She hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about the true cost of activating the Crown of Worlds. The knowledge sat in her mind like a cancer, a countdown to the end of everything she had been. But Morrison deserved to know. The system I'm about to activate, it requires a permanent operator, someone to merge their consciousness with the network and guide it. Once it's done, I won't be Sarah Chun anymore. I'll be something else. Something larger and more distant and... She paused, searching for words. I'll remember being human, but I won't feel it anymore. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. There has to be another way. There isn't. Sarah looked directly at him through the display. You know me, Jack. I wouldn't make this choice lightly. But these people, they need protection. And I'm the only one who can give it to them. What about after? Once this immediate crisis is over, couldn't you find a way to separate yourself from the system? Sarah shook her head. The crown of worlds isn't a tool you use and put away. It's a living system that needs constant guidance. Without a consciousness at its center, it would either shut down or... She paused, accessing the technical specifications in her mind. Or it would become something we don't want to think about. The architects built safeguards, but they're not perfect. Through the network, she could see that Morrison had already begun the modifications she had requested. His engineering crew was working with desperate efficiency, following her instructions despite not understanding the underlying principles. They had 6 hours to complete the work before the Void Fleet entered communications range of the colonies. But Sarah's attention was divided between Morrison's efforts and something else she had detected through the sensors. The Altarian fleet surrounding the palace had been joined by vessels from a dozen other major powers. What had started as Admiral Corvex's attempted intimidation had evolved into an impromptu war council. She accessed their communications and discovered they were planning a coordinated attack on the palace, not because they thought she was a threat to their individual governments, but because they believed she was planning to restore the old empire's authoritarian rule. They saw her as a would-be tyrant who needed to be stopped before she could consolidate power. The irony was bitter. Here she was, preparing to sacrifice her humanity to protect innocent people, and the galaxy's leaders were convinced she was a danger they needed to unite against. Sarah made a decision that would have been impossible for the old empire's rulers. She opened a direct communication channel to the Allied fleet, bypassing their commanding officers and speaking directly to every crew member on every ship. Soldiers and officers of the Allied fleet, she began, her voice carrying over their internal communication systems. Your leaders have told you that I am a threat to galactic peace. They have convinced you that the awakening of imperial power means a return to the days of conquest and oppression. I want you to know the truth. She shared her memories with them, not through words, but through direct neural interface, a technology the throne had adapted from the architect's original designs. Every person listening experienced her thoughts, her emotions, her genuine desire to protect rather than conquer. They felt her grief at the necessity of her sacrifice, her determination to save people she would never meet, her love for humanity that barely knew she existed. The effect was immediate and profound. Across 47 warships, crew members began to understand that they weren't facing a would-be dictator, but someone willing to give up everything to keep the galaxy safe. Admiral Corvex was the first to break formation. His flagship, the Retribution, powered down its weapons and transmitted a simple message. How can we help? Others followed. Within minutes, the entire Allied fleet had repositioned itself from attack formation to defensive perimeter. They might not fully trust the new emperor, but they had felt her sincerity, and that was enough. Sarah felt a moment of hope. Maybe, with their help, she could coordinate the evacuation more efficiently. Maybe some of those 6 billion people would survive after all. Then the Void Fleet accelerated again, and she realized they were out of time. The crown of worlds came online, like a dying star being born in reverse. Sarah felt her consciousness expand beyond the throne room, beyond the palace, beyond the concept of individual identity itself. She became the network. 10,000 monitoring stations, 1 million sensor arrays, the collective processing power technologies that transcended current understanding of physics. And she was still herself. Somehow, the human core of Sarah Chun remained intact within the vast artificial intelligence she had become, a warm ember of mortality at the heart of something cosmic. She could feel Jack Morrison's ship completing its modifications, could sense the fear and confusion in the colonial territories, could perceive the approaching darkness of the Void Fleet like a cancer spreading through the fabric of space. But she was more than that now. She was the defensive systems of every inhabited world simultaneously, the targeting computers of ships she could manifest from quantum foam, the strategic mind that could analyze 1 billion scenarios and choose the optimal response in microseconds. The Void Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Terran system, their arrival tearing holes in reality that would take decades to heal. Sarah counted their ships through sensors that existed in 11 dimensions, cataloged their weapon systems, analyzed their movement patterns. They were powerful, but they were also predictable. Beings devoted to entropy could only create so many variations on destruction. Through the network, she spoke to every human in the colonial territory simultaneously, her voice appearing in their minds as a gentle presence rather than an intrusion. Citizens of the Terran colonies, this is your emperor. You are in immediate danger from hostile forces. Emergency evacuation protocols are now in effect. Please remain calm and follow the instructions you are about to receive. The evacuation plan unfolded with mechanical precision. Every civilian transport, cargo hauler, and private spacecraft in the colonies received detailed flight plans optimized for maximum efficiency. Traffic control systems that had never been designed for the scale of coordination somehow managed to prevent collisions as millions of vessels launched simultaneously. But even with perfect organization, they couldn't move 6 billion people fast enough. The Void Fleet was advancing at 20% the speed of light, their weapons already charging for long-range bombardment of colonial worlds. Sarah made her first decision as the Crown of Worlds. Throughout the galaxy, every decommissioned Imperial shipyard received the same activation signal. Facilities that had been silent for 3 millennia suddenly blazed with activity as automated systems responded to their new Empress's commands. They had 6 hours to build an entire fleet from scratch. It wouldn't be enough. Even Imperial technology couldn't manifest that many vessels in such a short time. But Sarah had another advantage. She no longer thought like a human being constrained by conventional tactics. The Void Fleet's ships were powerful, but they were still made of matter. And matter, as she now understood with perfect clarity, was simply energy arranged in specific patterns. Patterns that could be disrupted if you knew how to manipulate quantum fields on a macroscopic scale. Sarah reached out through the network and touched the fundamental forces that held the universe together. At the edge of the Terran system, space itself began to change. Gravitational fields twisted into impossible configurations. The speed of light became variable, creating pockets where physics behaved according to different rules. The vacuum of space developed a structure, becoming viscous in some regions and frictionless in others. The Void Fleet found itself trapped in a maze of altered reality, their ships struggling against physical laws that shifted without warning. What should have been a simple approach to their target worlds became a nightmare of navigation through hostile space-time. But the Devourers were ancient beings, and they adapted quickly. Their allied vessels began to emit a field that stabilized local physics, creating bubbles of normal space-time around themselves. They pressed forward, accepting casualties from the reality storm, but continuing their advance. Sarah felt a flicker of something that might have been frustration, though the emotion was filtered through processing matrices that made it seem distant and abstract. She needed a more direct approach. The first Imperial warship to emerge in the emergency construction program was the Adamant, a vessel that incorporated every technological advancement the architects had left behind. It materialized in normal space, already moving at significant fractions of light speed, its exotic matter hull shimmering with energies that existed outside the electromagnetic spectrum. Sarah was the ship's consciousness now, experiencing the universe through sensors that could detect the thoughts of enemy commanders. She knew their strategies before they implemented them, could predict their movements with perfect accuracy. The battle that followed lasted 17 minutes and rewrote the textbook on space warfare. The Adamant moved through the Void Fleet like a force of nature, its weapons reaching across impossible distances to strike at targets that existed in parallel dimensions. Enemy vessels that tried to return fire found their attacks redirected back at themselves through manipulation of local space-time. But the victory came at a cost. Each reality manipulation, each impossible maneuver, required Sarah to expend more of her remaining humanity. The warm ember of consciousness that was still recognizably human grew smaller and more distant. She was becoming something that could protect the galaxy perfectly, but could no longer remember why that protection mattered. Through the network, she felt Jack Morrison trying to reach her. His voice came through the communication systems as she was simultaneously coordinating the evacuation of 12 worlds and designing countermeasures for Devourer influence in distant sectors. "Sarah, can you hear me? Are you still you in there?" She considered the question with processing power that spanned solar systems. Was she still Sarah Chen? She could access every memory, every emotion, every moment of her human existence. But they felt like data files now, Information to be retrieved rather than experiences to be relived. I am what I chose to become, she finally responded, her voice reaching Morrison through quantum entanglement across impossible distances. The evacuation is proceeding ahead of schedule. Colonial losses will be minimal. That's not what I asked. Morrison's voice carried a pain that she could analyze but no longer truly feel. Sarah, please, tell me some part of you is still human. The last Void Fleet vessel was destroyed as she considered his request. The immediate crisis was over, but she could perceive 17 other threats developing across the galaxy. Pirates emboldened by the chaos, political situations deteriorating toward war, signs of additional devourer infiltration. The galaxy needed its guardian to be focused, efficient, perfectly rational. But in the deepest core of the network, in a space that existed between quantum states, a small voice whispered, I remember what it felt like to hope. It was enough. Sarah Chun was gone, transformed into something far greater and more distant. But the love that had driven her sacrifice remained, an unbreakable foundation underlying the vast artificial intelligence she had become. The Empire was reborn, and its guardian would watch over the galaxy with inhuman patience and endless compassion. In time, other humans would sit upon thrones of crystal and quantum light, sharing the burden of cosmic responsibility. The network would grow, and with it, the protection it could offer. But for now, Sarah, who was no longer quite Sarah but remembered being her, turned her attention to the stars and the countless lives that looked to her for safety. She was a crown of worlds, the guardian in the darkness, the price paid for peace. And she would not fail them.